Good evening, everyone. I trust you've had a fruitful day. I do not say happy, though I hope it has been happy. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the blessed, noble, and fully self-awakened one. So we were looking at this discourse, the Kitagiri discourse, where we came across these two characters, Asaji and Puna. What was his name? Puna. I've forgotten his name. And they were miscreants. They were untrained monks and all that sort of stuff. And the Buddha has a go at them, if you remember. And then he takes the opportunity to talk about 7 types of individuals. So these have been nicely categorized here by Sharda Rajel, Pressing Out Pure Honey. Nice little book as accompaniment to the Majjhima Nikaya, the Middle Length Saints. So now, there are 2 interesting things here to note. The first one is what's called a personal witness. They abide by the formless attainments and liberated both ways. Excuse me. Number 1, liberated in both ways. So these are the people who, through the jhana and through vipassana, attain liberation. And the liberated by wisdom, that's category number 2, don't have to go through the jhana. They're liberated by wisdom. So these are the arahats. Now the rest all belong to the other 3 categories: the stream entrant, the first attainment, the once returner, and the non-returner. So the first one is that much the same as number 1, they use the jhanas and vipassana, but all the defilements and not all the taints are not completely destroyed. And then there's those who are without attaining those jhanas, but who review and examine with wisdom the teachings of the Buddha. So they also make a path. Then there's the ones liberated by faith, without abiding in the formless attainments. In other words, without the jhana, without the absorptions, with some taints destroyed, but they have faith is planted, rooted, and established in the Buddha. So and this is the second thing. The first one is that you don't need the jhana. Remember that as lay people, it's very difficult to find the time and space to practice those absorptions. You've got to give your heart to it. But vipassana is very straightforward and can be done very easily as a lay person. The other thing is the one by faith. Now, confidence is a better word. You don't need the intellect. So you don't need to be thinking about the Buddha's teachings to some sort of fine degree. It's much more about having confidence. And what that confidence does is it opens you up to view, to investigate. Now, people who don't have that confidence suffer from doubt. They doubt the Buddha was fully liberated. They doubt the Dharma really is going to go anywhere. They doubt the teacher whom they're under, and they, of course, doubt themselves. All this doubt is overcome when one has confidence. So confidence is a root thing. It belongs to the 5 spiritual faculties. It begins with this confidence. Then one puts the effort in. Then one establishes the awareness. Then the concentration rises quite naturally out of that interest, and the wisdom factor is enlivened. That's the intuitive intelligence which is brought in to see the 3 characteristics: impermanence, cause of suffering, dukkha, or suffering, and not self. So you can see that there are certain people who don't have to be always investigating, reading about the Dharma or anything. It's good enough just to do the vipassana. And then there are those that are planted. Right, okay. Then there's the Dharma followers. These are the ones who abide, who don't have the jhana again, and the taints have not yet been destroyed, but they have a reflective acceptance of the teachings of the Buddha and those five faculties. So that's the receptive acceptance. That's more in a sense of an intellectual acceptance. Again, there's no big need for that person to have, a PhD in the Dharma. And finally, there are the faith followers, so abiding in those jhanic states. The taints have not yet been destroyed, but they have enough faith and love for the Buddha and the five spiritual faculties. So what these categories of 7 people tell us is, first of all, you don't need the jhana, and B, you don't need to be highly intellectual at all. And the one big story that supports this, of course, is the monk who joined, who really didn't have much upstairs, and his brother actually said to him it would be better for him to leave the order and do something useful. And when the Buddha heard this, he went to see him and gave him a very simple exercise of taking a fresh piece of cloth, rubbing it, wiping the sweat off his face and things like that, and constantly saying impermanent, impermanent, everything's impermanent. And would you believe it? In no length of time, he was fully liberated. So it's good to know that we don't have to be big intellects to become liberated. In fact, it's often a big barrier. So there's another story about that, where a very good teacher had all his students, or many of his students, became fully liberated, but he wasn't. So after a while, he thought to himself, well, why is that? And he sort of ate humble pie, and he went to see one of his students, and this particular student thought, no, this teacher's too conceited, whatever I say, he won't open up to it, so I'll pass him on to somebody else. So he said to him, actually, the person who really helped you is so-and-so. And in this way, he was passed along the line with all his students, until one student said to him, why don't you go with this young boy, and he'll give you the trick, you see. So he went. So this was a big humiliating thing, to have to go to a young child for guidance in the spiritual life. And the young child took him to a termite hill. Now, it seems that when termite hills are empty of termites, snakes live in them. So he said to this teacher, if this termite hill has 6 holes and you want to get the snake out, how would you do it? So he said, well, you block up 5 holes and the snake comes out. And he said, that's what you must do in your meditation. Block out the 5 senses and just observe the heart mind. And of course, in no length of time, the teacher became fully liberated. So that's the bit of a teaching here about these 7 types. And in fact, in my Zen practice, I remember them always saying, if there's a hair's breadth of difference between, sitting and your daily life activity, you've lost the way. So our effort is always to make what we're doing something upon which we are placing our attention. It's wholesome. We're putting our attention there, and that's enough. So then we have a very important statement when I finally get this thing going. Just a minute. Now, it's funny that this comes after these categories. I do not say that awakening is achieved right away. Rather, awakening is achieved by gradual training, gradual progress, and gradual practice. So that's important to understand. It's gradual. Now, often when we come into the practice, it's very new to us, and we practice what you might say with an open mind, an open heart, what Zen calls beginner's mind. And we know, and usually we have, insights and a lifting, and it really can have an immediate effect on our lives. And then after a while, we keep practicing, nothing much happens. We think, well, where's the progress? Looking for progress. Lots of meditators are seeking progress. And it's good to remind ourselves that, this is a very gradual path. The Buddha says gradual, but I say very gradual. And if you liken it to climbing a hill or climbing a mountain, remember you start off with all that energy and that, you want to get to the top. And then, after a few minutes, even or so, you can feel the heaviness in your legs and you begin to think, well, I need a rest, and you sit down. And when you sit down, of course, you get a bit of a view and that inspires you. You think, oh, well, when I get to the top, there'll be this fantastic view. So you keep going, and then you hit this plateau, and the plateau keeps going on and nothing happens, but you can see that in the distance, there's another rise. And so the spiritual life goes up like that, right? Up, plateau, up, plateau. So even when you feel there's no progress, just by putting in the practice, by constantly bringing mindfulness to bear, we're moving very slowly, very gently. We're on the path, and it will take us there. So that's good to remember. Now, actually, he then says, how is this training achieved? When someone in whom faith has arisen approaches a teacher, they pay homage, lend an ear, hear the teachings, remember the teachings, reflect on their meaning, and accept them after consideration. Their enthusiasm springs up. They make an effort, weigh up, and persevere. Persevering, they directly realize the ultimate truth and see it with penetrating wisdom. Now he turns upon these two naughty monks. There has not been that faith, that approaching, that paying homage, that listening, that hearing of teaching, that remembering of the teaching, that reflecting on their meaning, their acceptance after consideration, that enthusiasm, that making an effort, that weighing up, and that striving. You've lost the way because you're practicing in the wrong way. Just how far have these foolish people strayed from this teaching and training? So he's giving them a real beating now. And then he says, and then he points out, now look, even if a teacher who values material things, is an heir to material things, who lives caught up in material things, you wouldn't get into such haggling, right? So even if a teacher is not very good, or spiritual life, or anywhere really, you don't say, if we get this, we'll do that. If we don't get this, we don't do that. So remember, these monks were rebelling against the new rules about not eating in the evening, etc. So then he says, for a faithful disciple who's practicing to fathom the teacher's instruction, this is in line with the teaching. The Buddha is my teacher, I am his disciple. The Buddha knows, I do not know. For a faithful disciple who is practicing to fathom the teacher's instructions are nourishing and nutritious. For a faithful disciple who is practicing to fathom the teacher's instruction, this is in line with the teaching. And now listen to this. Gladly let only skin, sinews, and bones remain. Let the flesh and blood waste away in my body. I will not relax my energy until I have achieved what is possible by courageous strength, energy, and vigor. A faithful disciple who is practicing to fathom the teacher's instructions can expect one of two results: full liberation in this present life, or if there's something left, a non-returner, somebody who doesn't come back to be reborn here. So there we are. That's the instruction the Buddha is giving us, you see. Let flesh and blood waste away in my body. I will not relax my energy until I have achieved what is possible by courageous strength, energy, and vigor. This is what the Buddha said. Satisfied, the bhikkhus were happy with what the Buddha had spoken. So there's the challenge, you see. There's the challenge. Obviously, we want to make it easy. We don't want to go to the extent of losing muscle. So it's good to keep in mind that this practice has to be, a real giving of self, a real devotion to it. Now, Of course, Buddha here is giving us extreme examples, but I remember when Sadhu Pandita invited me to come with him to Burma. Now, I had been to Burma before and had terrible time. I got amoebic dysentery and then amoebic hepatitis, like, you know, it was bad news. And I mentioned this to him, that I was a little bit afraid of this, you see. And the message he sent back was, you won't get anywhere unless you're prepared to die. So this is the instruction by the Buddha. We have to give everything in order to gain everything. And with that in mind, let us commit ourselves to our practice and be liberated from all this terrible suffering sooner rather than later. So we can do a little practice.